Um, okay. Very, very good afternoon to all of you present here. It's a lovely Sunday afternoon, and it's become far, far lovelier because Partha Sarthi sir has agreed to have a wonderful conversation with all of us who are aspiring to go to one of the top national universities. And I am also given to understand that people from the various other streams of preparation are also here to get some pearls of wisdom, to get some advice, some preparation strategies, and I think above all to get a feel and experience of the interplay between law and civil services per se in terms of what's the relevance of the legal profession, maybe not as much, but the relevance of the various regulatory requirements and so on in the area of civil services. So, very good afternoon to you, Partha sir. How are you doing this Sunday?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Debajyoti. It's a pleasure to join.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for making some time out to have this conversation with us. I want to start with some of the basic introductory things about you for those of you who are uninitiated. Partha sir is an IAS officer of the batch of 1994. He also graduated from Delhi College of Engineering before giving the civil services, one of the top tech schools of India, and he's also pursued an MBA and finished it off in Ljubljana in Slovenia, and he has been associated with various major cities and various development projects in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and currently serves as the additional secretary in the Ministry of Culture, along with having the additional charge of the Director General of the National Museum. Absolute pleasure to have you here, sir. Uh, Let me start with a little bit about your younger days, many, many years ago, after the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy and your initial days of posting. You were working in major cities like Banaras, Allahabad. You've also been the DM of Kaushambi. In your experience as as somebody who was handling these major cities, what do you think is the role of a DM or an SDM, particularly given that there are so many laws? When, as a law student, at the sheer volume of the number of laws that the DM is empowered to and has the duty to take care of, how does one really keep a track of things varying from distribution of COVID medicines or oxygen cylinders, or even giving licenses for weapons under the Arms Act? All of it falls within the jurisdiction of the district magistrate. So how does one go about it? To be honest,
When you join the IAS, then you are given one state as a cadre for people who do not know about the IAS. And in your career, then you work in that state and in Government of India. That is how your career progresses.
right?
As an IAS officer, your first posting is normally subdivisional magistrate, and then chief development officer, and then district magistrate. Most of the IAS officers would have done these initial postings always in their career, and all this takes place in the first 15 years of the career, first 16 years of the career. As you said, as district magistrate especially, there are a number of laws that in which the district magistrate has some role, legal or quasi-judicial role. Also as an SDM, as a subdivision magistrate. If you see, these laws can be divided into mainly two parts. One is, you can say criminal laws, and the other, which are what you can say revenue laws. So some of the laws will be state laws, like for example, the laws which deal with agricultural land. These laws will be state laws. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, when the time when I used to be SDM and DM, the two major laws regarding agricultural land used to be the Land Revenue Act and the Zamindari Abolition and Land Reforms Act, in which the SDMs and DMs have major roles to play. They also are presiding officers. They have their own courts, and they actually sit on and deliver judgments on issues related to agricultural land, ownership also. The other set of laws are the kind of criminal laws. So you have certain role under certain sections of CRPC or certain sections of IPC, under Excise Act and Arms Act. And many of the laws keep the legislature in this country keeps generating laws. So when for when I was SDM and DM, there was nothing called a Disaster Management Act. This came much later, actually.
2005.
There was nothing like a right to so there was nothing like a Right to Information Act. There was nothing like a Right to Education Act. So all these acts they keep evolving as the country, as the society develops. Fortunately, when you join the IAS, you also have a 1.5 years training in the Lal Bahadur Shastri Masuri Academy. So the central laws you are exposed to the central laws in that theoretical training environment. Having said that, whatever you know in the class, when you go to the field and actually sit as a presiding officer in a court, and for the first time you see the advocates of 30 years and 25 years experience coming and starting to argue their cases, and you have to write your first judgment, it's a completely different ballgame.
Right. No, I'm sure. तो सर आपका इसमें क्या thought process होता है कि as a young civil servant, does it sometimes also become intimidating कि कोई 55 years का lawyer अगर argue कर रहा है, maybe some of them are extremely successful lawyers also, you probably know them. कई सारे सिविल सर्वेंट्स आजकल लॉ के बैकग्राउंड से भी पहुंच रहे हैं, तो उन्होंने तो हो सकता है अपने लोकेलिटी के, अपने स्टेट के फेमस लॉयर्स को पहले से नाम भी सुना हो, जानता हो. So does it become intimidating also? How do you really balance it out?
Yeah, it is. I remember the first time I was sitting in the presiding officer's court as a young as a probationer officer.
Right.
And there was this advocate of maybe 60 years, a famous, local but very influential advocate of that area, with a standing practice of 30-35 years. I still remember the name of that advocate. And he comes and starts arguing about the restoration of cases. The cases which had been dismissed in default, and there he is arguing for restoration of these cases.
Right.
So it is kind of intimidating, and you think that you are sitting in a court which has a tradition of 100 decades and centuries sometimes, and you have to now deliver the judgment and decide on this. But slowly, it is something like you have to do.
Right.
You don't have a choice, so you kind of back yourself up, try to go back to what you learned in the classes, the kind of judgment writing practice that you did in your classes, and you back yourself up and write, and then at the end of the day, if it is wrong, you will go and appeal.
Right, of course. So there's always backup options at the end of the day. Right. So sir, just kind of moving on. In the later years, you've also been the head of various major corporations in the state of Uttar Pradesh, and you've headed various important schemes, a lot of which we keep reading in our GK sections while preparing for an examination like the CLAT as well. For example, you've been the director of the midday meal scheme in Uttar Pradesh. You've also headed the UP State Road Transport Corporation as well as the Energy Development Corporation. So out of all of these, I thought at least two of these are really interesting developments happening even today, whether it is the evolving area of right to education. As sir rightly pointed out, the amendments particularly came in 2002 through the 86th constitutional amendment. Those of you who are writing down, अंदर का टीचर सर पूरा खत्म नहीं होता है, तो मैं सोचा ये भी बता दो. Disaster Management Act is 2005 and Right to Information also is 2005. So of course, sir के early days पे वो laws आए भी नहीं थे, and that's absolutely correct. So sir, when you were, for example, something like midday meal scheme, ultimately it is largely focused on getting students into the classroom at a primary level and providing them with a certain security of food and so on. So how do you think our current landscape is moving towards our country? Is it moving in the right direction? Are we really getting enough students in the classrooms? We keep hearing so many bad reviews about the operation of primary schools. Yeah, teachers are changing. So what are some of these challenges that you faced in the running of the midday meal schemes?
Debajyoti, I would like to say that this last 1.5-2 years COVID is an
Right.
exception period. So we'll take that out from our analysis because I really do not know how this is going to play out. The last 1.5, 2 years of COVID pandemic in terms of schooling. Before that, I think in the last 20 years or so, there has been a major expansion of elementary education in terms of access.
Right.
Numbers of school which has opened up, the number of kids who have been enrolled and are regularly attending the class has increased hugely, both in government sector as well as in private sector. And that is a truth. That is a phenomena which you can see when we started our career and to what it is today. This is not only because of the government, it is also because of the aspiration of the parents to have their kids a better life, to give the kids a better life. So both these two combined has actually resulted in number of children going to school. So the school education has expanded enormously. And when something expands enormously in over 20 years, then the challenge of maintaining quality is an issue. Things get spread out and it gets thinned out. So when people say that in our days, 75 years ago, the quality of school education was very good, but one also has to see that quality education was given only to 10% of the people. So now it is giving to 90% of the people, and the next generation challenge is actually how to see that the people who are now coming to school are getting quality education. So from 20 years ago, the challenge was access, getting children enrolled to schools. Now the challenge should be recognized as how to give them quality education and how to make them better human beings and how to make them more employed.
So that is how this. Sorry, sir. The chat box is also getting quite flooded with a lot of questions. If you indulge me, I'll just ek do question come se come want to discuss.
I'm all game.
Absolutely, sir. Okay, so one of the questions is, sir, how difficult is it to become an IAS officer after pursuing law? Now, of course, I understand that you're from a science background and so on. बट प्रिपरेशन के टाइम आपको भी पॉलिटी और ये सारी चीज़ें तो आजकल तो 2 ऑप्शनल की जगह ऑप्शनल पेपर भी एक हो गया है. So people can actually opt for one law as well. So but what's your take on it? Is there any advantage or is there any disadvantage on a particular area of specialization?
People say about different subjects their relative advantage while they've been taken as an optional subject for the civil service preparation.
Right.
So, but my stand has always been that you should take your own subject.
Always. Right. तो अगर आप law school जा रहे हैं तो definitely law का एक optional paper.
I've never been able to understand that you study law for 5 years and then take anthropology.
Right.
Just because that is more scoring or supposedly more scoring.
More scoring. Right.
For example, in my time, there used to be 2 subjects. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession. Nobody used to take mechanical engineering.
Right.
But my subjects are mechanical engineering and history as an optional subject.
Right.
So
right.
If you are studying law, definitely take. And I know people who have, and in my even 5 years senior to me, people from NLU Bangalore. In those days, there used to be only 1 or 2 NLU.
Right.
And they did from NLU Bangalore and then joined civil services and have been very successful civil services. But a background in law does help you as a civil servant. That I can definitely say. I don't know how much it helps for clearing the exam.
Right.
But it helps you as a practicing civil servant. That is for sure.
क्योंकि इतने सारे लॉज से डील करना पड़ता है और ये सारी समस्याएं तो
the basic ideas of jurisprudence, how to write a judgment, how to appreciate the principle of natural justice, and the basic ideas of jurisprudence helps when you are working as a solicitor.
Right. Okay. So point well taken. I think. So we have another question, which is very very related. I think you've kind of already answered it. But so the question is, sir, is there any edge for us as a law student in the UPSC? If they're talking about the examination, I think sir has already pointed it out. But in terms of the actual services to be provided, there is a distinct advantage because of jurisprudence and so on. Another question from Akanksha is, sir, how it feels to be an IAS and what changes have occurred in life after getting such a designation? So more of a I think how do you feel kind of a question once this was. I know it's been so many years since you got your results perhaps, and अब तो feeling शायद नहीं but कुछ याद तो होगा सर कि कैसा लगा था जब आया था result.
I think it is a lot of glamour is associated with the civil service exams, and many people join or try for this exam because of the glamour associated with it. That your photo comes in papers and you become IAS toppers and they're in the billboards and things like that. which is some quite true now for CLAT also.
Yes.
And in our days that was not there. It is somewhere true for CAT. It is also true for IIT JEE. So these are basically the glamour exams in many ways. But one should go and try for the civil services, knowing the whole scene. It is not only the glamour that you should look into, because this preparation takes 2 to 3 years of your life. And if you're not really serious into it, and then you'll end up spoiling 2 to 3 years. So you should be very clear whether you really want to become a civil servant and then go into that path.
Right.
And one should also know that if you, for example, an IAS officer, people only see the good parts and the glamour part, that one becomes DM, and but one should also look into the fact that you will be posted in small places when your batchmates or when your college mates would be maybe living in bigger cities. Your salary will be much less than your counterparts who would have passed out from NLU and joined some legal firm. So if you have a very strong desire to do public service, then only I think you should join civil service.
Right.
But if you decide to prepare, then you should go all out, because it is not a halfway part-time preparation that you can do.
Yes, so it's I think everybody definitely knows it's by far and by a decent margin it is probably the toughest examination. Not just in India, but I think across the world, the Indian civil services is certainly widely recognized as. तो हाँ सर की बात एकदम ध्यान रखना ज़रूरी है कि अगर करना है तो मतलब बहुत सीरियसनेस के साथ, वरना हाफ मेजर्स में अचीव करना बहुत ही ज़्यादा मुश्किल. I never say impossible, but it's borderline impossible तो डेफिनेटली है. सर के बारे में एक और इंटरेस्टिंग बात जो आप में से कई लोगों को शायद ना पता हो, सर इज ऑल्सो वेरी वेरी डीपली कमिटेड टू लिटरेचर एंड हैज authored many books as well, documenting his travels and the joys of traveling amongst other things. And also, since he's Uttar Pradesh cadre IAS officer, he's actually written a very nice book on friendship and love, particularly focused in the streets of, it's called the Lucknow Diaries of love and friendship and so on. So it's wonderful read. So what I wanted to ask, not just introduce कि आपने कई books लिखे हैं, and how do you make the time to be able to manage कि कौशाम्बी में डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट का भी काम हो रहा है, वहाँ एनर्जी सेक्टर भी देखना है, मिड डे मील्स भी देखना है, एंड उसके बीच में ये सब किताबें लिखने की भी आपके पास समय हो रही है. सो आई थिंक, एंड द लार्जर क्वेश्चन इज नॉट हाउ डिड यू मैनेज, यू माइट बी super committed to a lot of these things, have a razor focus, but the larger question being ये जो work life का balance है, या अभी for the CLAT aspirants it's a balance of board exams and CLAT preparation, but essentially boils down to, if I want to do 2 things in life or manage 3 things in life, time management or balancing and prioritization, ये कैसे हम achieve कर सकते हैं? That's the question, sir.
I Debajyoti, wish I could answer it honestly. Like all of the students here, like you probably, we all struggle with that. This is a constant struggle to manage time, to focus on the priorities. Even in the old days, in the British civil service days, they were civil servants who were deeply committed to writing. And you would see Anthony Beveridge, Philip Messons, and even our own R.C. Dutt, who used to write. So there has been a long tradition of civil servants who have been authors, scholars, writers. However, in modern day, and especially for your students also, the distraction of smartphone and social media and OTTs is far more than the distraction of 2 things being done simultaneously. So I think for all the people who are preparing for any competitive exam, I would definitely say that focus demands sacrifice. If you want to focus for 1 year, for this 1-2 years, you have to consciously sacrifice certain things. You have to probably take out your OTT subscription. You have to probably come out of your social media account for each on his own. There's no standard prescription for everyone, but you cannot focus and also say that I'll not sacrifice anything.
Right. So achievement requires sacrifice at the end of the day. फेसबुक भी करेंगे, इंस्टाग्राम भी करेंगे, व्हाट्सएप भी करेंगे, और क्लैट भी करेंगे, और क्रिकेट भी खेलेंगे, सब कुछ नहीं हो सकता. यू हैव टू पिक एंड चूज. एटलीस्ट क्रिकेट बंद करना पड़ेगा, या ओटीटी बंद करना पड़ेगा, या क्लैट अपने आप दरवाजे बंद करके आपको बाहर खड़ा कर देगा. सो दैट्स, आई थिंक दैट्स द वे टू probably look at the time management and balancing priorities in your life, kind of an answer. So of course, it's been a long time since you've been in civil services. It's been what, almost 3 decades of the civil services, and I think आप उस point पे कुछ बता भी रहे थे कि बड़े शहरों में posting नहीं होती. And recently I was having a conversation with Deepak Kumar ji, who's also a civil servant in UP, and he was pointing out how in his very very early posting, गोरखपुर के बगल में कौन सी जगह पे posting थी, तो वहाँ पर हैंडपंप से उनको पानी एक्चुअली में निकालना पड़ता था. राइट नाउ ऑफ कोर्स इज सीनियर सिविल सर्वेंट नाउ, but most of the students in going to national law schools and posh campuses and air conditioned classrooms, तो उसके बाद I don't know how far people would be really looking at, जैसा कि आपने कहा कि ग्लैमर तो चलो दिख जाता है, बट छोटे शहर के संघर्ष शायद कई बार नहीं दिखते हैं. So in the 3 decades of civil services, or almost 3 decades of civil services in your life or in front of your eyes, how much do you think the profession has really changed, especially for young civil servants, whether they're from a law background or otherwise?
One major change is definitely the technology, especially the communication technology.
Right.
In the times when we joined, your students would not be able to appreciate what kind of computers we were using. Windows had recently come at that time, and there was no concept of mobile phone, let alone smartphone. So, an internet-connected smartphone is the major communication revolution, I would say, which I think we are not yet ready to appreciate fully.
Right.
So that has changed life of everyone, including the young civil servants who are working in the rural areas. In my time, when I joined the SDM shift, in order to talk to my district magistrate, I had to take up the wireless and to speak.
Right.
Because even the phone connection was not so reliable. So
even the landline connection was not reliable? That's what?
Even landline connection, after 52 seconds, used to break automatically.
Right.
So those were the days of this. You cannot even imagine those telephone exchanges that used to be there. Today, you just do a WhatsApp. You send any document on WhatsApp to whoever there is. So communication technology or communication revolution is a major change, I would say, which has affected everyone's of our lives in the last 25, 30 years, including the young civil servants. However, the fact remains that rural India is still operates in a different fashion. Hindustan एक साथ कई सदियों में जीता है. You will find India of 21st century, 22nd century even, in some of the blocks of the Delhi metro, Delhi or Bombay metros. But you will also find India of the 17th or 18th century also living in India right now at this moment as we speak. The civil service gives you an opportunity, if you look at it an opportunity, look this as an opportunity of seeing this Hindustan of all centuries in one carrier.
Right, right. So, and you would say that rural India has not really changed that much. Is that also something that you're hinting at? कि most of the progress आया तो है भारत में बहुत, लेकिन urban.
No, I'm saying it has changed. It has changed. It has progressed. But the gap between the cities and the rural India is still a huge thing. And sitting in New Delhi or Bombay, you cannot imagine how the minds of the people in some village or Mofussil town actually works.
Right, right. Sir, just a couple of last things that I definitely wanted to ask you. First thing is, since you've cleared 2 of the most competitive exams in India, whether it is the Delhi College of Engineering or it is without doubt the civil services, is there any basic preparation strategy? Now, I'm not obviously subject-wise का सवाल नहीं है, but I mean like current affairs is an important part of civil services preparation, and so it is for the CLAT examination. Level definitely अलग है. but the focus on current affairs, because these are high school students who've just finished off their high school, are still in high school. The focus on basic quantitative techniques, the focus on legal aptitude, language skills like English to compulsory hai hai for the CLAT examination. How did you approach, and what preparation strategy would you recommend? Like for example, कई लोग पूछते हैं कि सर हम रोज का एक एक सेक्शन को इतना इतना टाइम दे क्या, या आज का पूरा दिन हम एक सेक्शन पे दे. Should I do 1 week for a particular topic and then move on to the next topic? What strategies do you think the law aspirants of today should really keep in the back of their minds?
My answer will be, Debajyoti, not based on CLAT. I'm not exposed to CLAT exams as such. So what I'm saying is for a general competitive exam preparation. 3 principles. 1, people have to recognize that there is a limited period attempt. You are preparing for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year maximum. So it is only 2 to 3 years out of your life of 60. You can afford to sacrifice a lot many things for these 2-3 years and focus on the exam. The thing that I pointed out earlier also. Everything else will remain in life later also. For this 2-3 years, you can sacrifice a few things and focus on this exam. Not take the exam as a half measure attempt. If you are giving the exam, then give it full effort. That is number 1. Number 2, one basic strategy I have always felt is that you should cover the entire syllabus and then focus on maybe particular areas as your strengths. But do not do the mistake of leaving out certain syllabus at totally unprepared. So that is my take on the thing. You should cover the entire syllabus.
Sir, इसमें एक बात इंटरेस्टिंग बात मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा सर कि, एंड पर्टिकुलरली बिकॉज यूर अ साइंस बैकग्राउंड पर्सन, तो मुझे बोलने में थोड़ा खराब लग रहा है, but a lot of the law students though, because they're not necessarily from, and even if they are, they think like चल IIT नहीं हो रहा है या कुछ है, therefore we're coming to the legal profession. एंड अल्टीमेटली ये जो आप अपने बात कही आपने कि कोई भी सेक्शन को कंप्लीटली अंडर प्रिपेयर्ड नहीं छोड़ सकते या कंप्लीटली अनप्रिपेयर्ड. लॉट ऑफ पीपल फॉर मेनी मंथ्स इनटू देयर प्रिपरेशन मैथ्स पे फोकस शुरू करते ही नहीं है. तो मैं सर सब आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि आप लोग जरा एक बार आप अगर बोल देते सबको कि भाई ऐसा है, कोई सेक्शन वाला जो पार्ट है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. 20 ही मार्क्स के आते हैं सर, या 15 मार्क्स के आते हैं, 10% ऑफ द क्वेश्चन पेपर है, बट 10% इन अ कॉम्पिटिटिव एग्जाम इज प्राइसलेस. And it takes me weeks and months, and all of us here at Unacademy also, it takes us so much time to get this message across. तो तब तो जाके फोकस कहीं शुरू होता है. तो सर एक बार आपकी तरफ से भी आ जाता.
We always have this natural tendency, to do what is in our comfort zone.
Right.
So when you're preparing, you are good in history, you kind of tend to read more into history.
Right.
And I tend to avoid mathematics. If you're good in mathematics, you do the mathematics and you tend to avoid history.
Right.
So one has to be conscious about the fact that you have to cover the entire syllabus. The third point that I would like to mention, and this I think requires, I cannot overemphasize this, is to write answers. The examiner is not judging how much you know. The examiner is judging what you have written.
Right.
And there is a difference between what you know and what you have written.
Right.
So how to write in cogent language,
right,
in a particularly analytical form in that given time frame.
Right.
Especially if it is theoretical answers and not multiple choice answers. Then
so
it is very important that you write answers.
Right, sir. So most of the law entrances as of now, so मेरे time पे in fact NLS Bangalore के entrance में भी subjective section आता था, but ये CLAT के आने के बाद से they've made it completely multiple choice. Of course, a lot of the examinations still have a written aptitude test as a follow-up to the basic multiple choice questions. Like for example, Symbiosis has it, and a few other law schools have it. But a CLAT को जरूर, and I personally, मुझे भी हमेशा लगता था कि it is a much more comprehensive format. So 2006 is when I cleared NLS Bangalore and I got All India rank 20. And that year there was a question, short notes on Hawala hai, short note on ये, because the Abdul Karim Telgi scam had just happened. And I completely agree with you sir. जहाँ पे descriptive होता है थोड़ा written practice, and अगर written का नहीं भी है तो भी I think sir's point still remains that you should definitely practice multiple choice questions if that's the format that you're giving. Sir, एक और chat box में interesting type का question है. Shruti has a question saying, sir, it's really great opportunity to have a wholesome talk with you. Being a responsible civil servant, you too might be facing some or the other kind of criticism by the society, but not necessarily society, but there are various content. हम लोग आजकल अखबार में तो सर पढ़ते रहते हैं कि छत्तीसगढ़ में किसी सिविल सर्वेंट ने सनग्लासेस पहने थे, मोदी जी को मिलने गए तो देयर वाज एक्शन टेकन, कहीं कोविड के प्रोटोकॉल्स एनफोर्स किए जा रहे थे तो वीडियो बन गया. तो अगेन I think so. Even when I read the newspapers, I keep getting the feeling now it's a much tougher job given the technology advancements. As much of a benefit it might be, the scrutiny becomes so much sharper. And so, what are these kind of, if there's any kind of these kind of challenges that you've probably faced? ये एक question अलग से सर chat में.
The career of civil servant, in many of the assignments, most of the assignments, you are more exposed to the media than in other professions.
Right.
So it's like as a district magistrate, you're always in the public view. And in today's age, there is a camera everywhere.
Right.
So that is there. That comes with what you say. That comes with the territory, and one has to be extra careful in your behavior. That is why today, compared to say in my times,
right,
that has to be accepted. It is also a fact that there are certain pitfalls in every career. In every career, every vocation that you take, there will be pitfalls. So in civil servants also there are pitfalls. Sometimes you do face certain unfortunate situations, even when you do not have any fault. So that happens in every vocation. Every vocation has its plus points. Every vocation has its minus points, and it comes with the territory. If any of your students are interested in cricket and they can understand my cricket analogy, then in a bat pitch, sometimes when you play a copybook shot, still the ball can jump from good length and hit you on your face. But you play the next ball as it is. You do not play for that ball.
Right. And very, very interesting perspective, sir. I think. Does it also, sir, मैं भी क्रिकेट टेक्नोलॉजी सोच रहा हूँ कि जब अपने हुआ था कुछ साल पहले that फिरोज शाह कोटला में वो pitch was dug up and after that also match शुरू हुआ था and there was a massive uneven bounce. Ultimately the match was abandoned like within one over or something. So is it, what I mean is it also sometimes the case that कोई आके pitch को dig up कर गया है फिर भी बॉल का बाउंसर और ये सब मुझे हिट हो रहा है? कैन इट हैपन बिकॉज ऑफ अदर पीपल्स फॉल्ट, not just circumstances but intentional? Do civil servants also face that? Because we always keep hearing how civil servants are powerful and so on, but does it sometimes happen vice versa also?
Many of the life of the civil servants is not in the public view. The public view is only one.
Right.
So especially in the higher civil service, when you are secretary to government of India or principal secretary in the state government, then the kind of work that you do when you try to convince the minister and you try to give advice to the minister, that is never in public view.
Right, sir.
So at the end of the day, you see only the policy that comes out, but the process in which you are trying to convince the ministers or the council of ministers or the chief minister or that this is how it should be, that is never in public view. So a lot of the things that the higher civil servants do is never in public view, actually.
So sir has a very interesting smile on his face right now because I think he's reminiscing his days when he was secretary to the former chief minister and probably the future chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, Akhilesh Yadav ji, and some perhaps controversial kind of conversations that you've had to have with the ministers of that time, and maybe in the future also when you're going to be discussing these kind of things as and when things happen in a certain direction. So it was absolutely wonderful, sir, to take all of these words. That if you have any last tips, because we have interestingly the CLAT exam in fact is going to happen 2 times this year, because 2022 के बैच के लिए एग्जाम सर इस बार मई में हो रहा है और 2023 के लिए भी एग्जाम 2022 के दिसंबर में ही CLAT कंसोर्शियम वांट्स टू फिनिश इट ऑफ ताकि बोर्ड एग्जाम से अगले साल का कोई क्लैश का स्कोप ही ना बचे एंड सो ऑन. So any last words that you have before we thank you once again profusely for joining us here today?
Do the best, keep focused, do the best, but that is not the end of the world.
Right.
Do
Right.
whatever you want to do the best that you can do. But even if you don't clear, that is not the end of the world. There are other things.
Right. Okay. So the chat box, once again, of course, a lot of people thanking you from the bottom of their hearts and feeling very happy to have met somebody of your stature, and especially from you. So some of them are from UP as well. So I'm Uzefa Malik from UP West particularly. So kind of saying hi from Uttar Pradesh as well. I, by the way, currently live in Lucknow as well. So it's been some time since I've also had the good fortune of meeting you in person. Would love to catch up with you one of these days. Thank you very very much, sir, for taking the time out. I hope we didn't bother you too much with any uncomfortable questions, and I hope it was a decent use of your Sunday afternoon. Um, Thank you everyone for joining in, and I hope you also took all of these advice into and are going to incorporate it into your preparation process. Sacrifice is important. Focusing on all the areas and not choosing and picking what your favorite areas are. Making sure that one day, if after law school also, right? Abhi to law school ka stage hai, but after law school also, if you want to go into the civil services, remember that you should be in a position कि law की पढ़ाई ऐसी होनी चाहिए कि law का ही optional आप definitely ले सकें, and in the civil services of course law is definitely going to come in very very handy, particularly in the early days when you have so many magisterial functions to discharge. Exact summary तो सर मैं बनाने की नहीं, but कुछ थोड़ी बहुत I hope I've summarized the bullet points of what you said, and I'm sure people will go back and listen to this video all over again in any case. Thank you so much, sir. Have a wonderful day, and everybody else also, please have a wonderful Sunday ahead of you.